Welcome to Minerva Meets. I'm your host, Sonal Chandler, and this is episode 12, my 2024 season recap episode. So today I don't have a guest, but instead I'm going to take you on a journey recapping all of the great conversations that I've had with all of my amazing guests this year. I've really had an incredible first season. And I've had fascinating conversations with guests who've not only provided practical insights, but a whole lot of learning about cybersecurity and AI. In fact, this year I became a certified vCISO, which is a Chief Information Security Officer and an AI coach. And having these certifications and really getting better at these skills have been instrumental in helping me help my clients. Before we get started with this whole best moments of the season episode, I want to take a minute to thank all of you, my listeners. The feedback that I've received, the support, the texts of words of encouragement have really all just made this journey unforgettable. And, it really keeps me inspired to keep going. So thank you so much for that. All right, let's get started and dive in and look at these highlights. When I was prepping for this episode, of course, I had to use AI. And what it helped me do was realize that there was a common theme that flowed through all of the episodes, and it helped me naturally group these episodes into four distinct themes. And these themes include technology and workplace innovation, cybersecurity fundamentals, AI insights, and the industry specific challenges. And obviously this wasn't planned, right? Like the way these themes kind of evolved, it was almost as if though they're the pillars of the conversations that I've really been having all season. And I think that says a lot about some of the challenges that businesses are facing as well as opportunities. And then, I think it probably reflects something a little bit bigger on, how these fields are really connected together, right? And how they influence and reinforce each other. So it's not necessarily about learning or exploring just one topic individually, but really understanding how all of these come together that, really paint this bigger picture of innovation or even like business resilience. So, that was a big lessons learned for me because I didn't necessarily plan it that way. But then when I reflect back on how the year went and the conversations that I had, it's really interesting how this all sort of just played out because, these technologies like cybersecurity or AI more recently are really shaping how these industries innovate and how they go about facing their business challenges. And I think all of this stuff is really evolving in the workplace, right? So, as I go through this recap, I hope that you see that these themes weave together and shape the way unintentionally actually shape the way that we think about technology and security and leadership in today's world. All right, let's just dive right in. So let's start with number one, which is technology and workplace innovation. And episode one is really key to this because this is where I invited Paul Varnado to come in and talk about tech adoption in the workplace. And in this episode, Paul and I talk about how AI is reshaping workplaces by automating all of these repetitive, mundane tasks and really enabling individuals to focus on strategic, more creative work. And I think I probably have said that in at least every episode, at least once. He also talks about how when you think about tech adoption, you really need to start by understanding why you're doing it, like what's the driver. And then it's important to get buy-in from your team, from your stakeholders, because that buy-in is really what sets the foundation for success. One really great nugget that I thought Paul um, left me with was a quote that goes like this. And I'm not sure if this was his quote or if this was something that he read, through his career, but it goes, change is hard, but opportunity lies on the other side of fear. How profound is that, right? Because I just realized that, whenever we try new things, there's a little bit of fear. I mean, hell, me trying to put this podcast together or going off on my own, there was a lot of fear, but I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity on the other side of it too. Let's move on to episode 2, where I invited Rohit Gupta to talk about the role of analytics in the modern law office. And Rohit and I talked about how law firms can really enhance their back office operations through automation and AI, and by gaining insights from the data that they collect through legal analytics. And, this conversation really highlighted how these small and mid-sized law firms can leverage data and technology as a competitive advantage. And, I think that that's a theme that's really been resonating across all of the episodes to date. In episode 3, I invited Hugh Music to talk about human-centered design. And, I don't necessarily think that I had that much of an appreciation for human-centered design until I had this conversation with Hugh, because Hugh really reminded us that great design isn't just about tools, right? It's about designing with people for meaningful experiences. So, really solving the problem collectively and designing solutions around um, around people with people. And some of his stories were just so fascinating. So I really encourage you to go and listen to episode 3 to talk about how they've leveraged human-centered design in healthcare. There's also another key theme that I thought that he brought to light, which is human-centered design thrives on understanding people and embracing patience and fostering collaboration. So again, a theme that continues to resonate throughout all of the episodes. Moving on to theme number 2, which was cybersecurity fundamentals. Now, episode 4 was where I invited Jeff Englander to talk about the basics of cybersecurity. And Jeff shared a really interesting stat with us, and that is that 60% of small businesses fail within 6 months of an attack. That's insane, right? And I think this really goes to show why it's important for small to mid-sized businesses to be proactive versus reactive when it comes to securing their environments, learning about cybersecurity, trying to at least address the low-hanging fruit, right? He also talked about cyber hygiene and how cyber hygiene forms the foundation of a really strong security program. And I'll have to say that I just love those words, cyber hygiene, and you're going to hear me saying that more in 2025. Another episode, the cybersecurity fundamentals theme, was episode 6. And this is where Kathy Myron talked to us about governance, risk, and compliance, so GRC. And she basically explains how this is a practical framework that can benefit businesses of all sizes, big or small. And she also reminds us that, as we go through this process of implementing frameworks, to really work with a trusted advisor that understands how to apply these frameworks to business. I wanted to take a minute and read word for word some highlights or key takeaways that Kathy had shared with us, because I think these are great. Number 1 was cybersecurity starts with awareness. Everybody in business is vulnerable. It doesn't matter, what size you are, what industry you're in, everybody is vulnerable. And she encourages us to start the conversation with the organization, right? Start talking about these things so that there's awareness and so that you can come up with a proactive plan. He also encourages us to get a baseline, right? Understand where you are, where are your vulnerabilities, where are you exposed to risk, so that then you understand the gaps, and that will help inform your roadmap. It'll prioritize your tasks for you. And it's just a really great way of having a baseline to know where you are at and where you need to go. The third insight that she gave was around planning for recovery. And she talked about how prevention is key, but you also need to have a solid incident response plan in place. And as I talk about incident response plan, that actually leads me into episode 8, which was the conversation about the CrowdStrike incident. And this is where I had invited Chris Harrison, Keith Richard, and Byron De Jesus to talk about what happened in that CrowdStrike incident. I think that this panel really highlighted what happened and provided some insights into how something like this would happen. And I think the key message coming out of that discussion was that, the urgency of having a very strong incident response plan. I think all three of the guests emphasized that preparation is key. And I think it was Keith, yeah, it was Keith who reminded us that, IT isn't just a technology thing, it's a whole organization thing, right? And we'll see later on in this episode where I think somebody also had mentioned that IT isn't just a technology thing, it's a people thing too. And, Chris also talked about having patience during these incidents is key because, when everything is going in chaos, you really want to make sure that you've got people who are dedicated in managing client expectations, because those are the times when a client will decide to either stay because they want to weather the storm with you and you really manage their expectations, or they're going to walk away. A third theme that came out of this was centered around AI insights. And in episode 5, I invited Morali Kashabonia to talk about the foundations of AI and how companies can get started with it. Morali had provided some key insights as well, and I want to take a minute to review these because I think that these are key for any organization who is trying to figure out, how do you embrace AI? How do you get started? How do I get it integrated within my organization? And he starts by talking about what he calls start with small wins. And what he means by this is do prototypes, do proof of concepts, see the capabilities, test the capabilities, and understand how it works, understand how AI works. He then goes on to say, ensure that you have data readiness, right? So, going through that test of making sure that you have quality data, that you trust the data, that it's compliant, like making sure that your data is clean and ready to deploy. He also talks about engaging stakeholders early. One of the key things here is, engage stakeholders early, whether they're, leadership roles who are going to be key decision makers, or they're going to be the group or the team that's actually going to be working on the project, so that you build transparency across the board, right? Transparency and trust really to overcome any resistance that you might face throughout the life of the program. Another item that Morale talks about is adopting change management and really focus on communicating often, involving the key teams that are going to be doing the work throughout this entire journey. And then finally, this last one I really, really like. He says, think big, but act small. And what he means by this is, create a strategy and a roadmap that's 3 to 5 years down, right? That's got this outlook or this vision, but start with small, achievable projects, right? So that you can build momentum. And once you build that momentum, you'll see that snowball effect of positivity and the organization and other groups embracing AI as well. Moving on to episode 7, we actually took a different spin where I had invited Dr. Joni Cannell to talk about the human side of AI. And what was interesting, I think, about this episode is Joni reminds us that, yes, AI simplifies tasks, but it also alters communication patterns and our reliance on like critical skills like spelling in human interactions. And I'll be the first one to admit that I feel like I don't even spell anymore because I just rely on spell check. And then sometimes, like especially like on my iPhone, I'm like, wait a minute, is that really how you spell it? So, I think her message really hit home for me because she brought heart to the AI conversation, right? Like urging us to let AI and technology handle those routine tasks, right? But then really focus on being a human, and that's just so key. I mean, I don't even know if I remember a phone number these days. One thing that Joni said that really resonated with me was this phrase that she said was conflict over ideas is necessary for creative solutions. Think about all those times where you've been in those, I think they used to be called JAD sessions, right? Or those discovery sessions where you're trying to bring all these stakeholders from across the organization, in one room to talk about how to solve a problem. And there's a lot of interesting perspective, but that back and forth and that negotiating of how you want to do the solution really is so healthy. And she reminds us that having that type of discord is really necessary to get creative solutions. She also left us with three takeaways. Number one was to put humans first and design technology that prioritizes human needs and ethical use. She also talks about balancing technology. So, using AI for efficiency, but then also staying intentional about your human interactions, right? So, like, for example, if you work from home and your only interactions are through IM, maybe get up and go have a coffee with a colleague or meet somebody for lunch. And then she also talks about how awareness is key, recognizing the impacts of AI on these skills that we are talking about, the impact of AI not only on the skills, but the creativity and the relationships that we're building. Um, Episode 10 was where I was joined by the very entertaining Sean Flynn. And if you haven't met Sean, I encourage you to reach out to him. He's just such a fun guy. But I invited Sean to talk about how AI can transform investment banking. And, Sean really inspired me because he showed these examples of how AI really elevates roles in investment banking by automating routine tasks and freeing up people to build relationships. Like there's this whole diligence process where there's a lot of documents that are being collected and organized. And, if you take that, which really takes months to curate, and give that to AI, then that really frees up you and your staff to build relationships and hopefully making sure that these transactions come through more positively. The fourth and final theme that I have here is the industry specific challenges. And in episode 9, Trinell Pierce came on board and helped explain what extended detection and response was, so XDR. And she showed us how these tools can empower small and mid-sized businesses with lean IT teams. And, I think in this episode, Trinell reminded us that cybersecurity is not a luxury, but an investment in keeping your business secure and thriving. And that actually now leads me to the last episode, which is episode 11, where I invited Walter Anderson to talk about cybersecurity in the maritime industry. And I just thought that this was so fascinating because this is an area where I don't have a lot of exposure. And just hearing about all the different touch points and all the different places where you need security Just, really fascinating. If you haven't listened to that episode, I encourage you to go and do so. But in this episode, Walter really talks about the importance of performing regular risk assessments. And I can't tell you how important this is, right? We talked about earlier where Kathy even mentioned the same thing, where, understand a baseline, understand where you are, know where your vulnerabilities are, know where your risks are. Don't be caught off guard. Don't be surprised. Um, and again, Walter in this episode also talked about the fact that cybersecurity is a people problem, right? It's not just a technical issue. And I think that a lot of organizations have this thinking or this mindset that, well, we're just going to give it to the IT guys. And what they fail to realize is that cybersecurity, that starts up front. That's a whole organizational thing. We should all be thinking of a security first mindset when it comes to cybersecurity. We should all be proactive about it. We should build a culture of security. I think that that was a really great episode where Walter highlighted some of these key points of fostering that culture of security and proactivity. So there you have it, folks. That is what we learned in 2024. And if you're like me, I felt like we talked about a lot of topics that focused on AI and cybersecurity, and I really learned a lot. And it was just such a great season. But you know what? Here's the exciting part is that we're just getting started. We're going to learn so much more in 2025 because I am actually introducing something brand new called Minerva Minutes. Minerva Minutes are going to be bite-sized educational episodes that will focus on either a concept, a tool, or insight in under 5 minutes. So if you're short on time and you don't have time to listen to a 30 or 45-minute podcast episode, but you really are just needing some sort of knowledge snack, if you will, you can tune in and really just take in a Minerva Minute. And some of the things that we'll cover in the Minerva Minutes are cybersecurity best practices, AI tips, if there's any regulations or guidelines that impact or brush against cybersecurity or AI, I'll talk about those as well. And who knows, you might even see me on video. I've also got a great lineup of guests that are going to be appearing in 2025 along with the Minerva Minutes. And in January, I'll be releasing both episode for 2025, where I have Tom Cates talking about AI and customer service. And then I'll also be launching the very first Minerva Minutes. So make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast so that you'll get a notification the minute that that drops. And by the way, if you have topics or questions that you would like me to explore further, please feel free to drop me a line at let's talk at minervaconsultinginc.com. I'm just so excited to continue this conversation with you guys in 2025. So to everyone listening, thank you. Thank you for making Minerva Meets such a success. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, to leave a rating, to share your favorite episode with someone who needs it. Again, just thank you for all of the support. Until next year, stay curious, stay secure, and keep embracing innovation. I'm looking forward to a fantastic 2025. I hope all of you have a really great holiday. Thank you.